when the emergency klaxon shattered the midnight silence aboard Research Station Kepler 9. Lieutenant Marcus Chen had exactly 3 seconds to wonder if this was finally the day something would kill him before Command's voice crackled through every speaker simultaneously. Code Apex, unknown nest detected in residential sector 4. All personnel evacuate immediately. Security teams authorize lethal force. Marcus froze mid-step in the corridor. His coffee forgotten, because Code Apex meant only one thing on this moon: Vorath predators. The 600-pound nightmare creatures that could tear through reinforced steel and had wiped out the entire first colony expedition 13 years ago. The bioscanners never lied, and right now, they were screaming that somewhere in the sleeping quarters, an entire nest of apex predators had somehow infiltrated the station's most vulnerable area. Marcus grabbed his pulse rifle from the emergency locker, his heart hammering against his ribs as he joined the security team assembling near the sector entrance. Team leader Rodriguez's face was pale beneath her helmet. Thermal imaging shows the nest and residential unit for 7-2, multiple heat signatures, large mass concentration, she reported, her voice tight with controlled fear. How many? Marcus asked, checking his weapons charge. At least 6, maybe more. They're clustered together in what looks like nesting behavior. The words sent ice through Marcus's veins. Because nesting Vorath were the most dangerous. Territorial and absolutely merciless to anything they perceived as a threat. The team moved in formation down the eerily silent corridor, emergency lights casting everything in blood-red shadows. And Marcus couldn't stop thinking about whose quarters were in that section, who might already be dead behind those sealed doors. Unit for 7-2's door panel flickered with the biohazard lockdown seal, and through the small viewport window, Marcus could see nothing but darkness. Thermal confirms they're in the back section, near the sleeping area, Rodriguez whispered, positioning the door override. On my mark, flashbangs first, then suppressive fire. We can't let even one escape into the station. Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger as the door hissed open. But what happened next would replay in his mind for years to come. Instead of snarling monsters, they found her. The residential lights flickered on automatically, revealing a young woman standing protectively in front of her laundry unit, her hands raised, not in surrender, but in a pleading gesture. And Marcus's breath caught because he recognized her immediately, Lyra Ventari, the Celestian xenobiologist who'd transferred to the station 3 months ago. She was stunning in a way that made Marcus forget standard protocols, with delicate features that could have graced ancient earth paintings. Pointed ears that swept back gracefully through cascading silver hair that seemed to catch and hold the light. Luminescent violet, eyes wide with fear, and she wore simple station-ish sleep clothes, a modest fitted tank and tactical style pants, but somehow looked like she belonged in some Federation recruitment poster. Please, don't shoot please, Lyra said, her voice melodic but shaking with desperation, and Marcus noticed her slight Celestian accent made every word sound like music. Stand aside immediately. We have confirmation of Vorath nest in this location, Rodriguez commanded, but Lyra didn't move. They're babies, Lyra said quietly, and the words hung in the air like an impossible equation. Move now, or we move you, Rodriguez insisted. But Marcus found himself lowering his rifle slightly, because something in Lyra's eyes told him the situation wasn't what Command thought. Lyra slowly stepped aside, her hands still raised, and Marcus approached the laundry unit carefully, his weapon ready, but his curiosity burning. What he saw made him blink twice to confirm his eyes weren't malfunctioning. Curled up in Lyra's pile of freshly washed clothes, sleeping in a tangle of oversized station-issue hoodies and blankets, were 6 Vorath cubs, each about the size of a large house cat, their silver-gray fur rising and falling with peaceful breaths, tiny claws kneading the soft fabric in their sleep, making small chirping sounds that were almost heartbreakingly cute. These were the apex predators that had triggered station-wide panic. Marcus heard Rodriguez's sharp intake of breath behind him, followed by a long exhale of relief mixed with confusion. What the hell is this? She demanded, though her weapon lowered incrementally. Lyra's shoulders sagged with relief, but her eyes remained fierce. They're orphans. Their mother was killed in the canyon collapse last week. I found them starving and hypothermic near the research outpost. I couldn't just leave them to die. Marcus knew he should report this immediately. Knew that regulations were crystal clear about bringing unauthorized life forms onto the station, especially Vorath. But he found himself asking instead, "Why your laundry?" A ghost of a smile touched Lyra's lips. Despite the situation, they're drawn to warmth and scent. It comforts them, reminds them of their den, and apparently, my clothes straight from the dryer are the perfect substitute. One of the cubs stirred, yawning to reveal tiny, needle-sharp teeth, then burrowed deeper into what Marcus recognized as one of Lyra's sweaters. The station issue one with the xenobiology department logo. Rodriguez was already on her command, this is Security Team Alpha. Situation is not, repeat, not, hostile Vorath nest. We have juveniles, non-threatening, requesting immediate supervisor presence. The response was swift and predictable. Negative Team Alpha, protocols require immediate termination of all Vorath specimens on station, regardless of age. They're classified level 5 biohazards. Marcus watched Lyra's face drain of color, watched her move instinctively back toward the sleeping cubs, and he realized she was prepared to fight an entire security team to protect them. They're just babies, Lyra repeated, her voice stronger now, carrying that particular tone of someone who'd made an unshakable decision. They haven't even opened their eyes fully yet. They don't have their adult instincts. Right now they're as dangerous as earth kittens. Rodriguez looked torn between duty and the obvious evidence before her. Ma'am, I understand your position, but regulations exist for reasons written in blood. Those babies will be 600-pound killing machines in 6 months. Lyra's luminescent eyes flashed with passion. And in those 6 months, I can study them, understand their development, their social structures, maybe find a way to coexist instead of just killing everything we fear. Isn't that why we're out here, to learn? Marcus found himself speaking before his brain fully approved. She has a point. We've been on this moon for 5 years, and we still know almost nothing about Vorath behavior. This is an unprecedented opportunity. Rodriguez shot him a look that promised a very unpleasant conversation later. But Marcus couldn't stop watching Lyra, the way she stood her ground despite facing armed security, the way her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady, the fierce compassion in her eyes that made something in his chest tighten. The standoff was broken by the arrival of Station Commander Okoye, a severe woman in her 50s who'd seen more alien conflicts than most people saw birthdays. She surveyed the scene with calculated precision, the sleeping cubs, the protective xenobiologist, the hesitant security team. Explain, she said simply, looking at Lyra. What followed was the most compelling impromptu presentation Marcus had ever witnessed. Lyra, speaking with quiet intensity about finding the cubs, about the potential research value, about the ethical implications of destroying infant creatures whose only crime was being born the wrong species. Commander, I'm not asking to keep them permanently. I'm asking for time to study them, to raise them properly, and when they're ready, to reintroduce them to the wild, away from human settlements. We could learn more in 6 months than we have in 5 years of studying corpses and attack patterns. Commander Okoye was silent for a long moment, and Marcus could see the calculation behind her eyes, the weighing of protocols against possibilities. You would be personally responsible. They would be housed in the xenobiology labs under quarantine protocols. You would implement tracking, monitoring, and contingency termination systems, and at the first sign of aggressive behavior, this experiment ends immediately. Are we clear? The commander's words were precise and non-negotiable. Lyra's face transformed, relief and joy, making her somehow even more radiant. Crystal clear, Commander. Thank you. I won't let you down. As the security team dispersed and containment specialists were called to safely transport the still sleeping cubs to the lab, Marcus found himself lingering, ostensibly to file his report, but really to talk to the woman who'd just talked down a kill order through sheer passionate determination. That was either the bravest or most reckless thing I've seen on this station, he said, approaching Lyra as she carefully folded the clothes the cubs had been sleeping in. She looked up at him, and up close, Marcus could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the stress of the confrontation catching up with her. Probably both, she admitted with a tired smile that made Marcus's heart skip. I've been sneaking food and care to them for 3 days, terrified someone would find out. When the bioscanners finally picked them up, I thought this would end very differently. Marcus helped her gather the laundry, noticing how her hands shook slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. Why risk it? Your career, potentially your life, for creatures most people would call monsters. Lyra paused, holding one of her hoodies close, and Marcus saw something vulnerable cross her face. Because on my home world, Celestia, there were creatures people called monsters too, beautiful, intelligent beings that were hunted to extinction before anyone bothered to understand them. I was a child when the last one died, and I promised myself I'd never let fear win over compassion again. Not if I could help it. The raw honesty in her voice made Marcus see her differently. Not just as the brilliant, beautiful xenobiologist, but as someone driven by profound purpose. I helped with your argument in there, Marcus said, suddenly feeling awkward. I know, thank you. I didn't expect anyone to take my side. Lyra's smile was genuine now, warm. Why did you? Marcus surprised himself with his answer's honesty. Because you were right, and because anyone willing to stand between armed security and what they believe in deserves at least one person in their corner. Something shifted between them in that moment, a connection forming in the space between words. And Marcus found himself volunteering to help with the cubs' care, citing his xenobiology minor from academy training, but knowing full well he just wanted reasons to see her again. Over the following weeks, Marcus became a regular fixture in Lyra's lab, officially assigned as security liaison for the Vorath project, but actually spending his off hours helping feed the cubs, monitor their development, and increasingly, just talking with Lyra about everything from xenobiology to philosophy to the small, mundane details of their lives before the station. The cubs grew rapidly, their eyes fully opening to reveal intelligent golden irises, their coordination improving daily, and Marcus watched in fascination as Lyra worked with them. Her unique Celestian ability to read emotional resonance from life forms, allowing her to understand their needs intuitively. She's trying to tell me she wants to explore, Lyra explained one evening, holding the smallest cub, who'd been named Echo for her tendency to mimic sounds. How can you tell? Marcus asked, observing how Echo nuzzled against Lyra's hand. It's hard to explain. Celestians have this sense. We feel echoes of emotion from living things. It's not telepathy exactly, more like emotional empathy. And Echo feels curious right now, confined. She wants space to run. Lyra set up an obstacle course in the secured lab space, and Marcus laughed, watching the cubs tumble over each other, playing with an innocence that made the idea of them as deadly predators seem absurd. They trust you completely, he observed, seeing how all 6 cubs oriented toward Lyra, following her movements, calming at her voice. Trust has to be earned with any species, Lyra said, and Marcus wondered if she was still talking about the cubs. The turning point came during the station's monthly supply run, when Marcus found Lyra in the lab late at night, sitting on the floor with all 6 cubs piled around her, tears streaming silently down her luminescent face. What happened? Marcus asked, immediately alert for danger, but Lyra shook her head. Command sent the final decision. We have 2 more weeks. Then the cubs have to be relocated or terminated, and the relocation site they've chosen, it's a wasteland preserve, barely any prey species. They'll starve or have to raid human settlements and get killed anyway. Her voice broke on the last words, and Marcus felt his own throat tighten, seeing her pain. He sat down beside her without thinking, and one of the cubs, the largest male they'd named Titan, immediately climbed onto his lap, purring like a massive engine. Then we change their minds, Marcus said firmly. We show them what you've discovered, the intelligence, the social bonds. We prove these creatures are worth protecting properly. Lyra looked at him with those incredible violet eyes, hope and doubt warring in her expression. You really believe that'll work? Marcus reached out, his hand covering hers where it rested on Echo's fur, the touch sending electricity through his arm. I believe you can make them see what I see. That these aren't just research subjects or future threats. They're individuals, and you've given them a chance at life. That means something. What happened next felt inevitable and surprising all at once. Lyra, leaning toward him, Marcus meeting her halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that was gentle and searching and felt like coming home after a long journey. When they pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Lyra whispered, I wasn't sure if you felt, if this was just professional for you. Marcus laughed softly, his forehead resting against hers. Lyra, I've been completely gone for you since the moment you stood in front of armed security in your pajamas defending baby Vorath. Nothing about this has been professional for a while now. They stayed like that, surrounded by sleeping cubs. talking in quiet voices about futures and possibilities until station dawn broke through the viewport. The presentation to command was scheduled for the following week, and Marcus watched Lyra prepare with obsessive detail, compiling data, recording the cubs' behaviors, documenting their individual personalities and learning capabilities. The day arrived with Marcus more nervous than he'd been during actual combat drops, because he knew how much this meant to Lyra, how she'd poured her heart into these creatures. The command conference room was packed with station leadership, scientists, and security personnel, all skeptical faces and crossed arms. And Marcus felt a surge of protective anger at their predetermined dismissal. Then Lyra began speaking. She presented data first: growth rates, behavioral patterns, comparative intelligence metrics that showed Vorath cognitive development rivaled Earth dolphins. But the real impact came when she played the recordings. On the large display screen, the conference room watched Echo learn to solve a puzzle box to reach food inside, watched Titan gently play with a smaller cub, self-limiting his strength, watched all 6 cubs respond to Lyra's voice commands with nearly perfect accuracy. "These are not mindless killing machines," Lyra said, her voice carrying absolute conviction. "These are intelligent, social creatures with complex emotional lives. And yes, they're dangerous, but so are humans. And we don't terminate human children because they might grow up to be threats. We raise them, teach them, guide them toward better choices." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I'm asking for a real relocation site, a protected reserve with adequate prey populations and monitoring systems. I'm asking for the chance to prove that coexistence is possible. And I'm asking you to remember that fear is not a good enough reason to end lives that haven't threatened anyone." The silence that followed was profound, and Marcus held his breath, watching Commander Okoye's face. "The relocation site you're proposing would cost significant resources," the commander said slowly. "I'm aware, and I'm willing to dedicate my career to making it successful, to studying Vorath development and behavior, to potentially establishing protocols for human-Vorath coexistence that could apply to colonies across this entire sector." Lyra responded without hesitation. What none of them expected was Dr. Chen, the head of xenobiology and Marcus's distant uncle, standing up. "Commander, if I may, what Dr. Ventari has accomplished here is unprecedented, not just scientifically, but diplomatically. If word spreads that we're successfully raising and studying apex predators previously thought impossible to approach, the research grants alone would fund the station for years, not to mention the potential applications for other hostile environment colonies." Marcus saw the shift in the room, the calculation changing from cost to potential benefit, and felt hope surge. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it passed. A proper protected reserve would be established in the Northern Territories, monitored and supported, with Lyra heading a long-term study on Vorath development and human-wildlife coexistence strategies. When the meeting adjourned, Lyra's professional composure lasted exactly until they reached the corridor. Then she turned and hugged Marcus with such force he stumbled back laughing. "We did it. They're going to be okay. They're actually going to be okay," she repeated, her voice muffled against his shoulder. Marcus held her tight, breathing in her scent, feeling her joy like physical warmth. "You did it. You fought for them and you won." The relocation day came too quickly and not quickly enough, bittersweet in the way all goodbyes to beloved temporary charges must be. Lyra had spent the night before in the lab, sleeping surrounded by the cubs one last time, and Marcus had joined her, both of them silent in the dark, listening to the peaceful breathing of 6 creatures who would have died without Lyra's compassion. The transport to the reserve went smoothly. The cubs, now nearly adolescent size, still playful, but showing hints of their future power. And Marcus watched Lyra release them into their new home, a sprawling territory with forests and streams and carefully monitored prey populations. Echo was the last to leave Lyra's side, the smallest cub pressing against her leg and making that peculiar chirping sound. And Lyra knelt down, pressing her forehead to Echo's, something passing between them that Marcus's human senses couldn't detect. But that clearly meant goodbye. On the transport back to the station, Lyra was quiet, and Marcus simply held her hand, understanding that loving something sometimes meant letting it go to give it the life it deserved. "Do you think they'll remember me?" Lyra asked as the station came into view. Marcus squeezed her hand. "I think you changed their entire world. How could they forget?" Back on the station, life gradually returned to normal, or rather, to a new normal that included Marcus and Lyra being officially together. Her brilliant mind and passionate heart balanced by his steady pragmatism and dry humor. And the xenobiology department buzzing with new research proposals and funding offers. 6 months after the relocation, the monitoring drones sent back footage that made Lyra cry happy tears. Echo, now a magnificent, fully grown Vorath, leading her siblings in a successful hunt. Moving with the deadly grace of an apex predator, but showing none of the random aggression toward humans that wild Vorath displayed. The group actually avoiding the monitoring stations rather than attacking them. She remembers, Lyra whispered, watching Echo on screen. She's teaching the others that humans aren't threats to be eliminated, just other beings to avoid. The implications were staggering. The possibility of conditionally raised Vorath coexisting with human settlements. And Lyra's research became the foundation for new approaches to hostile xenofauna across multiple colonies. 1 year after that terrifying night when Command reported an unknown apex nest and Marcus burst through a door expecting monsters, he stood in the same residential unit, now Lyra's and his shared quarters, watching her fold laundry with that same care she'd shown sleeping cubs. "Remember when you told security these were as dangerous as Earth kittens?" Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Lyra laughed, leaning back against him. "I may have slightly understated their danger potential." Marcus turned her to face him, his hands framing her luminescent face, still struck by how someone could be so beautiful and so fierce and so gentle all at once. "You know what I think? I think the most dangerous thing on this station that night wasn't the Vorath cubs." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what was?" Marcus kissed her softly, then whispered against her lips, "A woman brave enough to believe that compassion is stronger than fear, because that kind of belief changes everything." Lyra's smile was radiant. "Good thing you were brave enough to believe it too." Through the viewport, the moon's surface stretched wild and beautiful. And somewhere in the northern territories, 6 apex predators who shouldn't exist peacefully were thriving. Living proof that sometimes the greatest strength isn't the power to destroy, but the courage to protect. Command's original report had called it an unknown apex nest, and in a way, they'd been right. They just hadn't understood that the real apex predator that night was hope. And it had made its nest in the heart of a silver-haired Celestian, who refused to let fear win. And in doing so, had changed not just the fate of 6 cubs, but the future of an entire world's approach to the beautiful, dangerous unknown.